Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast, a podcast brought to you by the Hare Krishna Project, an initiative to share Krishna consciousness with a new audience. This is episode number 24. I can't quite believe we've managed to get to the 24th episode without being struck off air yet. But it's great to be with you today. Those of you that have seen the last 23 episodes know that pretty much overall, for most episodes, we've kind of kept to that understanding that we're talking to devotees from Britain. Once before, we spoke to devotees from the United States, and today our guest is from, gotta get the name of the country correct, the Federal Republic of Germany.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Kalakanthi dasi, great to see you.
Same.
Thank you for joining us this week. It's good to have somebody from Europe on the podcast. And in a while, the listeners and the viewers will understand why I've invited a guest from Germany on this week's show, because we're kind of just about linking today's topic to Britain. So many of you would have seen on the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page, YouTube channel, we've been very keen to promote and celebrate Gaudiya Vaishnav history, and particularly the history of the Hare Krishna movement in Great Britain. Those of you, little plug for my book, those of you that have read my book or seen my book know that actually the Hare Krishna movement in Britain has roots going back almost 100 years, back to the 1930s. There was a very small Hare Krishna movement from 1933 to 1937. And today we're going to talk about one of the personalities that was involved in that movement. Today I'm really pleased actually that we are talking about Swami Sadananda Das. Dandavats.com, which is the unofficial news service of ISKCON, recently shared a photo of Swami Sadananda Das. He was wearing, this is from the 1930s, he was wearing his suit with a white bead bag. And it looked I like the photo personally. I'm all in favor of devotees wearing Western clothes. And it was a wonderful photo, and it got a lot of devotees kind of asking questions about who is this personality. And I will allow our guest to talk in a minute. And a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, Kalakanthi dasi messaged me, kind of tracked me down via the internet to say that she's writing a book. She's doing research for a book about Swami Sadananda Das, which is how we've got to today's topic. So I think what we'll just start with is kind of talking a bit about yourself, very briefly, where you're from. We know it's raining in Germany. So tell us a bit about you, where you're from, and how long you've been involved in the Krishna Consciousness movement.
Yeah, so my name is Kalakanthi dasi, or Katrin Stamm. So I'm living in Flensburg, which is very north of Germany, right at the border to Denmark. And I'm really involved for quite a long time now into Krishna consciousness or the Bhakti yoga path. So it's, I think when I was 19 or 20 or so, I started, and I got to know a Prabhupada disciple then, Vasudeva Das. And he was also had contact to Sweden, to the Swami Sadananda group. And that's how I got the connection to the Sadananda school, or family, if you want to say. And since then, actually, I've been studying his translations, his letters, and so on, working with them. First just reading, later translating into English, translating books of Walter Eitels, his disciple, into English, like this huge book about Krishna Chaitanya, and The Meaning of Life, which is about the yoga path, for example. So, and eventually all the letters, books, whatever Sadananda wrote, ended up in my place, so to say.
Wow.
And now it has become the Sadananda archive. And it's even more wonderful to work with all these texts. And it's also a great resource for writing a biography, which I'm trying to do now.
That's amazing. And it sounds like a huge task as well. To kind of, in one sense, start from scratch. There's the information's out there, I guess, for the biography, but it's about bringing it together to put it in one place.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. And I mean, really to create a consistent timeline and to bring together the sources. And I mean, the problem is that I never met Swami Sadananda Dasa in person. So his Tirubhava was in 1977. So I was 5 years then, no chance to meet him in person. So all I can rely on are his letters, diaries I have from him, but he scarcely wrote about himself. It's mostly translations. So it's really like searching for the needle in the haystack to find personal information and then put them together and try to get an image of his whereabouts and also what his motivation, so what moved him, what was really important for him. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I came across Swami Sadananda Das several years ago. I was reading about kind of certainly 1930s Britain, and I was particularly focusing on Britain, but often this personality from Germany would keep kind of coming into the discourse, if you like, or the dialogue about what happened with the devotees in Britain in the 1930s. When I was compiling my book, I did consider for a while whether I should really extend this and look at the Hare Krishna movement in Europe. But based on the time that I had and just the task that would, how long that would take, it wasn't a task that certainly at the moment I would have time to do. And because when you read about what happened in London in the 30s, then you find out there was things happening in Germany in the 1930s as well. I mean, Ridai Bon Maharaj went to Germany in the 1930s, who was one of the 3 devotees that came to London in 1933. Do you want to tell us a bit about how Sadananda Swami first discovered Krishna consciousness and round about when was that?
Yeah, I mean, that's really amazing because there was a French translation of the Bhagavata Purana by Bournouf, and it was, I think, from the 1870s or so.
Wow.
And so very early, and yeah, his mother read to him from the Srimad Bhagavatam when he was a child, when he was a little boy. He says, we are sitting by the stove. I was sitting at the feet of my mother, and she was reading from the Bhagavata Purana in French to me. And this is how his first connection, how it happened. And I mean, you see, this is, it's amazing. It can't be without Adyata Sukriti. So there has to be a story before, so that I think it must have been 1900 and maybe 16 or so. He was born in 1908. So maybe when he was 6 years old or 1914. So his mother already read the Bhagavata Purana to him. So, and from his early age, he's in a letter to Swami Bon, he writes that already when he was 14 years old, he was searching for a deeper conception of religion, truth, and Godhead than the religion of his original Christian confession. So he was searching, but he didn't already know where to find it. So the first thing naturally, he studied comparative religions, because that's the best way to find out about which religion comes closest to your own understanding of truth. And I think Narada Das, you know best.
Yeah, I mean, I did a degree in comparative religion as well, which, I mean, I wouldn't say changed my life. That's a bit dramatic, but it had a huge impact on my understanding of different religions. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that in those times also it was necessary to learn all these ancient languages. So already in school he learned Latin, And then before he he was allowed to start studying comparative religion, he had to study Hebrew and Greek. So when he had the classics, so then he could start. And then he became very much interested in Mahayana Buddhism. And of course, what do you need to read all this? You need to learn Tibetan and Japanese. And let's have a look, and Chinese. Yeah, so these were the second 3 languages he learned for his studies. And then he wrote his thesis about the Pradya Paramita Ritaya Sutra and its significance for the development of the Shunyata speculation. So he fully dived into Buddhism, and he also became a member of the community of Buddha that was founded in Berlin then at those times. And then it was one winter night. So I think let's see, when was it? It was I've written it down here. Yes.
It's okay. It's all right. Don't worry.
Yeah, it was in December. Then Swami Bon was touring Germany, giving lectures, and the community of Buddha invited him. So, and there was also not just the community of Buddha, but also the promotion committee for Indo-German understanding, so in Germany. And so they learned about this Swami Bon traveling Germany, and they invited him. And he gave a lecture, and obviously it was really, it made a very deep impression on Sadananda. And also later on, he wrote that he was so touched by the message, by the purity of the message, so that there's a religion where you serve God without wanting anything in return. Usually you get something or you want something. So, but this purity of what Bon Maharaj told of this bhakti yoga, it really touched his heart, and immediately he knew, that's it. I have to go. I felt like I have to jump into this and give everything for this path. And it's funny that after the lecture, I found a small note in one of the diaries where he said he took a walk with Swami Bon down the wintry road in Berlin, Friedrichstraße, and they had a talk, and yeah, how it impressed him. And so one could say this was the turning point in his life. And it only took 3 more months for him to, after several letter exchanges, to go to London and join the temple with Bon Maharaj, Tirtha Maharaj, and immediately he was initiated. So I mean, maybe this answers your question. So this was like the turning point, and it was quite dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about a month ago, I think. Time seems to go quick about some of the dates from the 1930s, and it was for several months during 1934. Swami Sadananda Das did spend time at the Hare Krishna Temple in Drayton Gardens in Kensington in London. I've talked, a lot of you will know, I've talked about a lot on this platform before. There was a Hare Krishna Temple in London in the 1930s. And Swami Sadananda Das, at the time, get my pronunciation right, at the time he was known as Ernst Georg Schulze. Is that?
Ernst Georg Schulze.
Yes, Georg Schulze.
Schulze, yeah, genau.
German is not my first language.
Say church, and then you have Schulze.
So he spent several months at the temple in Kensington, and we believe, according to some reports, around 7 Westerners or 7 foreigners, rather, different. We don't use that word often these days. 7 Westerners were initiated in London in the 1930s, and Swami Sadananda Das was one of them. There were a number of others as well. And Kalakanthi Dasi and I, about a month ago, tried to work out all the 7. And we think we got to 6, maybe, or 5. It was it's because trying to get this information and put it together is not not that easy. So Swami Sadananda Das did spend several months in London in 1934, and he was initiated. His kind of first stage of initiation happened before he then finally in 1935 he went to India, Bombay, we don't call it Bombay anymore, to meet his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakhur Prabhupada. So can you tell us a bit about that meeting, what happened in 1935 when he went to India?
Yeah, I mean, we could do that. So
or whatever you want to talk
yeah.
about, really, in whatever order.
I think it's quite amazing that we still have the letter exchange between Bhaktisiddhanta and himself from 1934, shortly before he moved to India. And I mean, I was really amazed when I was reading it, because I felt like it was such a perfect example for Sharanagati. So I felt that it was so obvious that Sadananda didn't start at the beginning of the stages. I mean, when we think of the stages of Shraddha, and then you continue with service, with bhajana kriya, and then you become steady, and then you receive taste and all this. And when I read these letters, I felt, oh, he's going through these stages like a rocket. So, and I think it is very, very beautiful to read, to learn about his way of taking shelter. So if it's okay for you, I would like to quote a little bit from these letters.
Please.
I haven't really prepared it. It just came to me, and now I have the letters here. So I try to find the most important passages. So maybe there will be some little pauses in between where I have to scroll.
That's okay.
But if that's fine, okay. So so he was initiated right upon arrival in London. It was on the 20th of March in 1934. And then almost a month later, or so in April, or like 4 weeks later, he wrote a letter to Bhaktisiddhanta. And it was always done in this way, that when Swami Bon was writing a letter, or Swami Tirtha, then he could put his lines together with that letter, and everything was sent to his Guru Maharaj. So I will quote from this letter from the 13th of April, his first letter directly to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And now I will have a look. Where shall we start? Yeah, I think it is very important that he wasn't attached or attracted so much by the Guru, or let's say by Swami Bon, the Indian who came there and was very exotic, but he was attracted by the message. So he writes, I was so strongly attracted by the unique thoughts on the means and the way to regain the pure condition of the soul, that is the royal road of bhakti, in distinction to the way of self-enjoyment and self-annihilation, displayed in the book by Sri Sanyal about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this book had been given to him by Bon Maharaj. But he also writes, and was so impressed by the rare purity of the soul of Sri Bon Maharaj, that I got induced to endeavor to get deeper and acquainted with those souls who are able to write such holy books and make such an irresistible impression on me. And indeed, my next thought was, what a blissful entity must be the spiritual teacher of those holy men, as he is the sun for the planets. So, and I mean, this says a lot also about his whole understanding. And so he was attracted by the message, so to say, and by the purity. And the purity that consists in neither wanting to get remedies against the pain of this world, and also neither getting some enjoyment or higher enjoyment than what you get here. So I think this says a lot about what was triggered in his heart, that he thought, that's it. Bhakti yoga, that's special. So I want to follow this. And then, yes, so he writes about reading these books and so on. And then he says, as at last I could no longer bear the separation from the true devotees, I knew to be present in England, and I joined Sri Swami Bon Maharaj in London in the humble desire to be favored by your divine grace. So here we already have this feeling of viraha, so to say, from the true devotees, that if you know you belong there, you cannot exist not being not in their company. And then what he did was he did service. So now we have bhajana kriya. So and he writes, I am sincerely endeavoring to serve the two Swamijis by listening to their teachings and by following their advices. And I do not know how to express my great gratitude towards them. And then he writes something very beautiful, I think. So he says, as if somebody comes from the stormy sea into the sheltering harbor. So I come from Germany and out of my many inner troubles into the devotional atmosphere of the monastery of the mission. So from the first day, I realized the immense kindness of all 4 members of the mission and their constant help in all concerns. I opened my heart to their influence in promoting my spiritual life and tried to follow their example of the constant service of Godhead. So he got immediately understood. So bhakti is service. And I think we all can relate to this, image he's giving, that I mean, whenever you enter a temple or even a church, you feel like you are like on an island amidst the stormy sea of samsara, and finally, and now you've reached the harbor where you feel safe and you feel that your soul can develop. So I don't want to go I could read without end, so you but I just wanted to give you an expression, like how from the very first beginning he grasped the essence of bhakti yoga, which means bhakti yoga is not about getting anything in return, and it is about service and service to the devotees. And this is what he did, and I think that really sped up, so to say, the whole process. And then when he as what you asked, that when he arrived in India, so then actually I think he was really busy with everything, and we have hardly any personal documents from that time, because from other devotees we know, like from Sridhar Maharaj, that he stayed up all night translating his Guru Maharaja's lectures into German, and that he was constantly studying and listening to his Guru Maharaj the little time that he actually had. He didn't know then, but he was really following him on his preaching tours to Darjeeling and so on. And he was taking notes from some lines that mattered to him. And so that's what we have from those days, but nothing so personal like what I've just read from the letters here. So yeah.
Yeah, we read in certain books, in certain descriptions, that Swami Sadananda Das went to India in 1935 with Hridai Bon Maharaj to meet Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakhur, and also there was another German gentleman with him as well. You know, I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong.
Yeah.
Baron H. von Kurt.
Good. Yes. Oh, you're doing it almost so well. Very nice.
German isn't my first language. So there was two German gentlemen that went with Hridai Bon Maharaj back to India. Hridai Maharaj was returning from since he'd been in 1933 in London, and it was obviously a very jubilant time, I would imagine, actually, for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakhur, because he had sent these missionaries to Europe in 1933 to try and encourage some Western people to take to Krishna consciousness. And there on a big boat were some Western people. coming back. So for Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, it must have been quite a joyous occasion. And I'm sure that I have read, and you've told me as well, that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakhur, at one point, he said to Swami Sadananda that you and I have been together forever.
Yes, that's a really amazing statement. I mean, so like they were, of course, he didn't say so in public, but so when he was surrounded by his disciples, and that's when he said this sentence. So you get the feeling that, I mean, you understand that Swami Sadananda Dasa, so he just didn't come out of the blue, so to say. He had a history. Yeah. And this is, to me, I mean, I always feel when I read his texts that there's the same clarity and sometimes sharpness that also Bhaktisiddhanta had. So the strictness. So like to say, this is Bhakti, and this a little to the right side, but it's not Bhakti anymore, because you see there you have this motive, and there you have this concept, for example, of Mayavad ideas, which comes in, and like sorting everything out which is not Bhakti, so only Bhakti remains, the pure thing. And this is something that Sadananda really took up, this method. So, and there's also one instruction that he wrote down that he received from his Guru Maharaj, from Bhaktisiddhanta. Let me see. So yeah, I can also just, here we have it. He said, so the first thing you have to do is to collect all what you have learned, read, excerpted, felt, known, put it in a big bag and throw it into the sea where the sea is deepest, and start anew. So, and later on, it was the same method that Sadananda applied in his teachings. He told everyone, try to unlearn first all the concepts of what you believe the soul is or love of God is. So just put it in a bag and drop it into the sea and start anew. And then like without all these goggles, you usually wear like these colored goggles, you look at what it is, what the Shastrams say, and listen. And if it talks to you, and if your heart stirs, so your Atma is touched, then it's the right thing. And if you feel no, there's no resonance, then it's fine, because God gives the freedom to everyone to choose his and her path. And there are so many paths, and not everyone has to become a Krishna Bhakta. So that was like his attitude.
Can we talk a bit about Swami Sadananda was in India for a long time. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakhur left this world physically in January 1937. And then Swami Sadananda didn't return to Europe until 1961.
Correct.
So that's a 24-year gap.
Quite some time.
A quarter of a century. A quarter of a century is quite a long time. So can you tell us a bit about what Maharaj was doing in India, what was happening during that time?
Yeah, so I mean, he had these few years with his Guru Maharaj, and then of course the Gaudiya Math broke into many pieces, and there was a lot of quarrel, and so like many others, he distanced himself. So, and I think it was, let me have a look. 37 exactly. So then, he made let's say the typical South Indian tour in the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he traveled as a mendicant all over India, so from north to the south, and he held lectures at universities. And of course, I mean, he must have been quite a sight. He was very tall and very white, and dressed in the cloth of a brahmachari. And So probably he got quite some attention, and he was really intelligent. So, and yeah, so we have some leaflets from the lectures he gave during that time. And he had a list like with topics he was offering to talk about. So, and yeah, and actually when he then at the end of the tour, he was invited by some prominent men of the University of Allahabad to found a monastery and scientific institute in Allahabad, where teachers and students could get the opportunity to study the interrelations between modern science and ancient culture. So that would have been a perfect place for him, so to be there. But as it happened, so Second World War happened, and it was British India then. So all enemy foreigners, so to say, were put into into internment camps. And so he was German, so he was rallied up like with the Italians and the Austrians and everyone who was against Britain in those times and who was an ally of Germany. So all these people were rounded up and put into internment camps. And that was where he stayed from 39 to 45. Wow. So it was like 6 years in internment camps, and different ones. Like it was like 3 different camps. So first Ahmednagar, and then Deolali, and then eventually Dehradun, which is in the Himalayas. So, and a small fun fact, if somebody knows the movie with Brad Pitt, 7 Years in Tibet. So Brad Pitt played Heinrich Harrer, this German mountaineer. So actually they were at the same time in the same camp. Wow. So if you watch that movie again, you can look for Sadananda somewhere. No, joking. But I mean, it's for me, when I discovered this fact, I thought, oh, now I get an impression on how it looked like. I mean, maybe how it felt like. So Heinrich Harrer, he wrote a book about it. And of course, I read what he wrote about the camp. And then I put things together, like what Sadananda wrote about the camp and what Walter Eitlitz, very important, he became a very important disciple of Sadananda. He was an Austrian writer and poet. He was also interned in the same camp, and there they met. So, and he wrote a very interesting book. It's called Unknown India in English. In German, it's Bagda, eine Odyssee, an Odyssey, so to say. And there he writes about this time in the camp, and also about their meeting Sadananda and getting first instruction about Bhakti Yoga, and how he struggled with, because before he had an Advaitin guru, so he was all about oneness and mysticism and stuff, and then he met this very strong Bhakta who said, no, that's not the right way, and it's like this. And so if you're interested in that episode, please read Unknown India by Walter Eitlitz. Have you already read it?
I have to confess, I haven't read it. No, my reading list is huge at the moment, and I find it very difficult to get through it. But I will read it, and I haven't seen the movie either. But I'm keen to watch the movie.
You will watch it with other eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in history anyway, and different things that happen, particularly in the 20th century. Did Swami Sadananda ever really talk about his time in the internment camp?
I mean, we have all these diaries. I mean, it's all these like with pencil, like school exercise books, and full with pencil written, and we have them both here actually in my place, both from Walter Eitlitz and Sadananda. And it's amazing because they are sort of getting mixed, because we have, for example, you have a diary or notebook from Walter Eitlitz, and suddenly there's a dictation by Sadananda, like certain Leelas or verses from the Bhagavatam, and he dictated the whole Jaiva Dharma to him during that time. So, wow. And which means he first translated it and then dictated it. So, and Yes, and then you have like these dictations, and then you have small annotations by Walter Eitlitz, how he reacts to it emotionally. So, and then it's then again it's personal stuff, and it's all mixed. And yeah, but the notebooks or diaries from Sadananda, they are mostly really more notebooks and not so much diaries. So you have maybe a date on the first page, and then it's all translations, like directly from the Bengali or from the Sanskrit Bhakti Shastras into German. And these translations later became the basis for the typed versions of his translations. So we have these typed versions, but still it's there's a lot of work to be done just to go through all these notebooks and diaries and compare them maybe with what about the process of editing. That's very interesting. So yeah, but I wish I had many lives, or I could multiply myself at least 7 times, so that would be nice. But as a Bhakta, I'm of course not interested in the cities, and I just hope it happens as a byproduct maybe at some time.
So that was the war, very difficult time.
Yes, indeed.
Swami Sadananda was given sannyas, I think, in 1954.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course we have to get forward a little bit faster. So, but maybe one incident, you have to know one incident, because like in 42 in the camp, like he was, Sadananda was like sitting in samadhi, so to say. He was thinking about the yoga pit and doing his spiritual sadhana, and then a very aggressive sergeant, he kicked him in the belly to make him rise from the meditation. And from this kick, he got his intestines were damaged, and he had like 4 or 5 subsequent operations in the camp, and he was never well again. So he got like an infection with, I think it's called staphylococci or so. So like a bacteria which you cannot get rid of with penicillin. And they continued to make his life later on very difficult. He continuously had infections that broke out in different places. So, and you have to know this, because this explains quite well why he couldn't just be a happy traveling sannyasi from place to place. So this became really difficult for him. So, and he first made contact after the camp with Swami Bon in Vrindavan. But somehow there were also like these conflicts that Swami Bon had with the Gaudiya Math, or the groups of the Gaudiya Math in those times, that Sadananda couldn't stand that. And so he distanced himself as well from Bon Maharaj and the Gaudiya Math and so on. So, and then he was quite alone, so, and sick. And but he was in one way, he was very lucky, because eventually he was like, sitting by the banks of the Ganges in Benares and at Prayag Ghat, like as a begging sadhu with nothing, sick, no money, nothing left. So, and then he met a Vaishnava family that they were very poor too, but they were so touched by this silent gesture of him sitting there that they became friends. And eventually he moved in with them. So they just came to Benares for a pilgrimage, and they were living in Calcutta. So eventually he moved to them and lived with them in Calcutta, not in the best part of the city. Actually, it was more the slum part near the train station. But he lived there for 10 years, like with 14 family members and 4 rooms. And they served him wonderfully. I mean, without them, he would surely have died. So we owe them so much. And I was very grateful when I managed to contact the still living young daughter from those times. And I
Wow.
was also a teacher, and we wrote back and forth. And she told me about how it was for her as a young girl of 12, 14 years when Sadananda moved in with them and how they served them. Yes.
So this was kind of the end of the second half of the 1940s. That obviously
Yes.
the incident happened in the internment camp. He was then on the Ganges River, kind of waiting
It
for
was,
something.
yeah, and like, well, yeah, so I think it must have been 48, 49 that they
Wow.
met, and so it took some time. So in the meantime, he was assisting his friend, the scholar Haridas Das. You've probably heard of him. There was one issue of, I think, or it was one article about it in the Journal of Vaishnava Studies, and they at the Calcutta at the Bhaktivedanta Research Center, they had a huge conference about Haridas Das last year, I think. And yes, and he was really good friends with him. So they seem to have shared the same spirit. So like in the 50s, 1950 or so, he must have spent or lived with Haridas Das. In 1950, he became Indian citizen. In 51, he moved in with the family of Gauranga Krishna Ghose in Calcutta. And there he stayed for the next 10 years until he moved to Europe. So until friends made it possible for him to come back to Europe. Yeah.
Wow. It's quite a story. I didn't know that he was so ill for so long.
Yeah, constantly. I mean, actually, only when he came to Switzerland eventually they could really cure him. But they really tried their best. And I mean, I was so amazed when I even found a letter by Jawaharlal Nehru, the then president of India, uh,
Wow.
who arranged. So France made it possible that Nehru arranged like a hospital doctor and everything, because I mean it costs money to be in a hospital. It's not like you have an insurance and all is fine. So even Nehru was involved, and they really tried to cure him, but it was not possible in India. So, and that's eventually that's how it came that, I mean, Walter Eitlitz, he had gone back to Europe. He went to Sweden because he was Jewish. His wife and son were Jewish, and so during the Nazi times they had to emigrate. They emigrated to Sweden, and that's why Walter Eitlitz was in Sweden. And so, and there was, he still was in contact with Sadananda in India. So there were letters going back and forth and back and forth. And Walter Eitles was writing books about Bhakti, and Sadananda was providing him with the translations and everything he needed to write these books. So there was so to say, and Walter Eitles had quite a community in Sweden. There were summer camps every year, and he was teaching bhakti yoga, and he was very popular. So, and then they made a big newspaper article about the sick German Swami in India, and they collected money. And so with all this money, they made it possible to buy a train ticket and then get him to Europe eventually
Wow.
in 61. So like after several attempts, like they started to get him back like in 56, but he was always too sick to come. So, but eventually in 61 they managed.
Wow. So can we kind of fast forward to the 1960s and 70s and talk a bit about Swami Sadananda in Europe? You know, what was he doing? Where was he living? And obviously you describe yourself as a Shiksha disciple of SwamiJi. So obviously we can chat a bit about your link with him. So yeah, let's talk a bit about the 60s and 70s and where Maharaj was staying and what was he up to in Europe.
Yeah, so he remained an Indian citizen because somehow it was very difficult for him to get back the German citizenship, and eventually he gave up. So he remained an Indian, so to say. And so there were also friends in Switzerland. So actually his base was in Switzerland in Basel, where he had rented a room with an old lady and her daughter, and they rented out this room, and somehow it happened so that he rented this room and that he lived there. And during the summertime, he spent like some months, like 3 or I don't know, maybe 6 months, he went to Sweden. So it was always like wintertime in Switzerland, summertime in Sweden. So, and what he was doing then was that he had, of course, he had all his own notebooks with all the translations, and now he started to type them. So that, and the way he did it was like he was dictating and friends were typing. So this is how they spend their time mostly. And of course, like with the inner circle of disciples, he was also, of course, he was also teaching Bhakti Yoga. So, but there was never a big, he was never into like putting up a mission or something like this, or trying to be known as a guru. He always said, no, I will dress as a European gentleman, and don't pick this, don't stick this label guru onto me, then everyone will just jump onto me because they find it exotic and they want to get miracles and easy solutions for the difficulties in life, and don't put me into that role. I want to be like, I'm there for the few who really are searching for the purest form of religion there is. And all the others, they can go. There are so many other options, but I don't want them. Yeah. So he was not interested in, getting
I've
disciples.
seen, I can't remember how it works, but either above or below this podcast, I'll put links to the Sadananda website and also Facebook page. And I love some of the short film clips on the Facebook page that show Maharaj kind of walking around with his followers, his disciples, his students. And to me, it just looks so intimate, because he's wearing these Western clothing, and he's got his disciples as well, European disciples, also wearing Western clothing. And it's certainly very different from other Bhakti followings you would see in the 60s and 70s, well, not just the 60s and 70s, but throughout history. So I've become quite fond of watching those short films, and after this podcast, people can see those as well. So he had quite a small following. Did he wrote books?
No, he didn't write books. He was like, he was providing Walter Eitles with material, and especially material for this wonderful book about Chaitanya, so that in the first part gives all the theological background, and building up on this is giving the life of Chaitanya based on the original sources, like the Chaitanya Bhagavatam, for example, or the Kadacha by Murari Gupta, and all these different sources. And that's so wonderful. And the book was finished in 1968. So you see that this was the main project, and he was working very hard with Eitles on this book. So he said, I wanted like this. He said, like, I want to stay behind because I'm also very sick. So, and I'm not able to hold lectures and do such stuff. But you, Walter Eitles, you're already established here, and you're an established writer, and people know you in Germany, they know you in Switzerland and in Sweden. So you write the books. And this is how they did it.
So just so I think I understand, Walter Eitles, his initiated name was Vamanadas. Vamanadas.
Yes. Yes, so actually this was the name that he received from his Advaita guru before he met Sadananda. And later on he was initiated by Swami Bon in 1946 in July, when he departed for Sweden. And then his name was, let me think, actually 46. Oh no, that's in the other file. It was, I think it was Vimala Krishna Vidya Vinod. I hope I don't get it wrong now.
So
yeah, Vimala Krishna Vidya Vinod Das. He was initiated by Swami Bon. So, but he kept Vamandas because it's a servant of the dwarf, and somehow Sadananda was always joking about it with him, and yeah, it stuck with him. So he remained Vamandas. So
Vamadas, in which year did he receive initiation from Hridaya Bon Maharaj? Do you
46,
know?
46.
In Europe?
No, in Bombay.
In Bombay. I was going to say, yeah, it must have been India, because I don't think Hridaya Bon Maharaj returned after 1936. I don't think he returned to Europe.
No, it was like this, that Sadananda was released earlier. He went to Vrindavan to see Bon Maharaj, and then they both came down to Bombay upon the departure of Walter Eitlitz. So, and then, so to say, he quickly received initiation.
What I find interesting, we spoke about this some time ago, was that back in the 1960s and 70s in Europe, you had three, teachers of Bhakti Yoga. You had three prominent Gaudiya Vaishnav gurus, if you like, preaching. So obviously the most well-known was A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who was also in Europe often in the 60s and 70s. He first came to London, I think, in 1968. Might have been after 1969. And of course, a godbrother of his, Swami Sadananda, was also on the same continent. But they didn't meet, did they, in the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, well, he didn't meet in the like Bhaktivedanta Swami and Sadananda. They didn't meet in Europe, but they had already met in India.
Yeah.
Like when Sadananda arrived in 35. Yeah, so in Bombay, it took some time because he didn't go directly to Calcutta, and it was like let me see.
Yeah, I think
in September he arrived in Bombay, and I think, well, at least it took some weeks, and during that time he stayed with Bhaktivedanta Swami, and there's a letter to Mario Vindish from 1968 where Bhaktivedanta Swami, he recalls this time together with Sadananda, and he writes, "In Bombay, sometimes we lived together, and he used to treat my little sons very kindly. His heart is so soft as a good mother's, and I always remember him and shall continue to do so." So they had a very early and very close encounter, so to say. But later on, it somehow, of course, Bhaktivedanta Swami, he was traveling, and Sadananda, he couldn't travel because he still was very, again and again, the sickness came back and he was quite weak. So yeah, it was for him not possible, so to say, to travel and meet Bhaktivedanta Swami, but he received his Bhagavad Gita. So like, this is what Bhaktivedanta Swami did. He sent him his Bhagavad Gita and his kind regards, and it was mostly through Mario Vindish, Mandali Bhadradas, who had known Walter Eitlitz and Sadananda even before he joined ISKCON. So like Mandali Bhadradas, he was like the link through whom the communication went during the times in Europe between Bhaktivedanta and Sadananda.
I do find it fascinating when you kind of look at the history and we try and piece different things together. Some of you might be thinking I mentioned there were three different spiritual teachers in Europe.
What's the third one?
So who's the third one? Well, the third one was Daisy Botel. I've talked a bit about her in my book, The Hare Krishnas in Britain. Daisy Bhotel was one of those Western converts in the 1930s that we know that she continued to practice Krishna consciousness till 1981. She passed away. She left her house in the will to the Gaudiya Mission UK. And she was an initiating spiritual master. Strong word, spiritual master. She was an initiating spiritual guru in London in the 1960s and 70s, a woman initiating at the same time that Prabhupada was in the same city. And they were all, you know, God brothers, God sisters, you know, all disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakhur in Europe in the same time, at the same time teaching. Obviously, most people know about Swami Prabhupada because of the growth and the size of ISKCON, but very little is known about those other two personalities, which is partly why we're doing this podcast today.
Thank you.
It's very important. I think it's very important, particularly when you look at some of the you know the teachings and the work of Swami Sadananda and the following that he still has today. Tell us a little bit about, tell us a bit about, you obviously alluded to your age when we started the podcast and you said, well, Swami Sadananda left the world in 1977 and you were 5. And
yes.
So you didn't receive initiation from him in that kind of formal Diksha sense. So tell us a bit about your guru and the kind of link in the Sampradaya.
Yeah, so initiation was like initiation rituals were never a big thing, so to say, in this group. But Tulasi malas were brought from India and initiation was given. So, but I think maybe only like directly by Sadananda, maybe 5, 6, 7 people, not more. So it was always a very small circle. And among these was one Swedish lady, which actually became my Guru Devi. So there is, again, you see, it's still possible to have a Guru Devi in Bhakti Yoga here in Europe. And yeah, she was Swedish, and she was actually, I mean, it was very clear that she was very elevated, like as a bhakta, so to say, because she refused in every way to be seen like this. So she was already the oldest one, and I think when I met her, she was already like 90 or so. But she was,
wow,
she always but she always wanted to serve the others. So what was special about her is, like when we usually meet once a week in Sweden every year and read for 1 week. And I also met her there, and she was the one who was first into doing the dishes or cooking or doing this. And if you have any health problems, she would listen to you and give you advice, like what you should eat, and like really like the good mother, like really caring for you. And then, but on the other hand, when we were reading and when she was present, the reading was always so different because she was able to truly listen. I've never seen anybody else listen in such a way, like really Shravanam. I mean, you have these 9 processes, and if it says if you do one in perfection, you can reach the highest goal. And I think she was she was an expert, the guru of Shravanam, so to say, listening. And so the host was always Kid Samuelsson, who was inviting everyone like into his house every summer. So, and like he was organizing the readings and stuff like this. And he was very dear to her. So, and at some point when she was getting older and older, like 94, 95, she said, would you mind, have you ever thought about giving Diksha? I mean, there are some young people here and they need Diksha. No, I'm not doing it. So, and then it took 1 or 2 more years, and then eventually she agreed, so to say. And so obviously it was done in a very simple way. Like, I mean, just like she prepared the mala and she told me like the Maha Mantra, and she told me the other mantra, so which I received from her, and just gave it to me like with the Shakti she had. And I mean, it was, yeah, it's life-changing.
It sounds very beautiful, actually. It sounds very beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, they were sitting in the kitchen, and all the others were outside drinking coffee like you do in Sweden. Everybody drinks coffee and eats cake. So, and we were sitting at the kitchen table, and I was receiving initiation. I mean, it was lovely. And actually, so some years, with 99, she passed away then. But I mean, I still felt and always feel connected with her. So there's no question.
And when did she leave? When did she pass away?
Yeah, when she was 99, but don't ask me now which year it was. Oh, no, I don't
worry about it. It's fine. Everything, as you get older, things just blur into one, don't they?
Yeah, I think maybe it's already like 10 years ago.
Wow.
I think 10 years have passed till then, yes.
So tell me a little bit about kind of what's happening now, you know, the Swami Sadananda mission, if you like, in Europe. I know there's very few of you, but you represent something very important in Gaudiya Vaishnava history, particularly in Europe. You know, he was one of the very first Western converts in Europe in the 1930s. And, you know, my view, and I hope other people's views as well, has played a very important role in you know, in Krishna consciousness over the last 100 years. The fact that his photo is being shared on ISKCON platforms is a good thing. So tell us a bit about the kind of what's happening now. I mean, you run the website, there's the Facebook page, you're writing a biography, and there's a few of you that meet together, I think, every now and then, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, during the pandemic, it was not really possible, so we did it via Zoom. But I think everyone has found out that Zoom sanghas are not as bad as you thought in the beginning. So they are a way to keep contact, and that's very nice. So, I mean, yes, I mean, I hope that we are going to meet again next summer. So this is what we are doing, like meeting and reading together. And like now, some of my Swedish god brothers and sisters, they are now translating texts into Swedish. So
Wow.
so that's what they are doing right now, and they did a new translation of the Damodar Lila into English, which so to say, a fresh translation, and also. Yeah, but I mean, the German Bhakta book will be published again. We are going through it now, and we'll bring it out with annotations, but it will be in German. So, and then of course the Chaitanya book, the book on Chaitanya, which was originally in German, it's also a project that this German edition, there will be also a new edition, because now we have the English translation, but we still only have the old German. So, and we added quite some footnotes and sometimes also corrections, even from the author himself in the English edition. And now this has to be done also in the German edition. So that's work in progress, so to say, what we are working on. But I wish we had like I had like a small workshop with someone who's doing translating and someone who's scanning the documents and someone who's repairing and storing the documents, because like I feel like I'm both a museum editor, archive. So, and of course I have to earn money, so and unfortunately so time is limited, so I try to do what I can in my lifespan, and then people after me will come.
God willing, Krishna willing. I mean, I was just looking at the reason why I was looking down. I was looking at the Facebook page, and you've got a lot of followers, almost 1,500 followers, which is really good. And I just applaud you and your kind of God siblings, God brothers, God sisters, kind of keeping the mission, keeping the flame, if you like, of Swami Sadananda kind of going, burning. It's really important. Some of the bigger sanghas like ISKCON will keep going for a long time, and there's different kind of archives and different people doing things. But I'm of the opinion it's important that the whole Gaudiya Vaishnav family keeps going, because it's really important. And Swami Sadananda has played a huge role in kind of Western Krishna consciousness, just another term, Western Krishna consciousness, over the last 100 years. I was just also thinking we were talking a bit about Western converts on our last chat a few weeks ago, and we talked a bit about Arnold Korbluth and another lady who were initiated in London on the 1st of October 1933, which was the anniversary was just a few days ago, a few days ago, and that's my goodness, 80. I'm having one of those days today. 88 years ago. 88 years ago. So long time, isn't it? That the Western people have been involved in Krishna consciousness. It's been fantastic to have you as the guest on this week's podcast.
It was my pleasure.
Really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that the listeners, the viewers watching this on Facebook or YouTube have also really enjoyed, we don't use the word often in Krishna consciousness, I've been happy to receive information about Swami Sadananda Das, a god brother of Srila Prabhupada, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, Keshava Maharaj, Puri Maharaj, Daisy Botel, Vinodvani Devi Dasi.
Exactly.
got to include the women. Always important to include women. And also Stella Harris. I can't remember what name she was given. Vishnu Priya. Stella Harris was also initiated in London in the 1930s. So thank you, Kalakanthi Dasi, for joining us this week. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
If you're watching this on YouTube, please feel free to put a wonderful, nice comment and like it and share the link with all your friends. And if you're watching this on Facebook, please do the same. You can like it or love it or care for it. Different emotions that you can express on Facebook these days, and also share it and put a positive comment. And above this, I keep getting confused, above or below this broadcast, there will be links to the Swami Sadananda website, official website, and also the Facebook page, which you can look at some of the footage of Maharaj in Europe and find out a bit more about his biography. And I'm sure that you will be keeping people updated about the biography on the Facebook page and the website.
Yes, surely. I do.
And so, and thank you all for tuning into this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast, episode 24. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Hare Krishna.